Hey guys, Dr. Justin Marchegiani here. Today's video is going to be on the top 3 mitochondrial toxins. What are the big toxins that are affecting your mitochondria and your body's ability to produce energy? Excited to dive into this topic. This is a common one that I see with a lot of patients that have, let's say, lots of chronic fatigue. So when we look at fatigue, there can be a couple different vectors of it that we kind of want to look at before we go into the big toxin element of fatigue. So we'll dive into that in a minute. Before we do, please smash that like button, give me a thumbs up, put your comments down below. Let me know what you think about this topic and your experience with it. All right, so let's dive in. So when we have fatigue, there's a couple of different ways fatigue could happen. So we want to rule out adrenals, right? Your adrenals are your stress handling system that produces glucocorticoids like cortisol that are on a circadian fashion, right? That just means up in the morning, down at night. It's called the circadian rhythm. Light and dark cycles dictate it. So cortisol goes up in the morning with light and down at night as the light drops, and then the moon comes up, melatonin starts to come up, which then tends to also drive cortisol down. So circadian rhythm and adrenal rhythm makes a difference. So if you have chronically low cortisol, that can definitely impact energy. Next, of course, would be thyroid function. Thyroid's really important, right? You make T4, which is our relatively inactive thyroid hormone, converts to T3, which is our more active thyroid hormone that helps with metabolism, energy, body temperature, right? Metabolism really is the sum of all chemical reactions in our body, which means really energy, heat, body temperature. When we start to have lower metabolism, energy drops, hair quality drops, temperature drops, all these things drop. So these are really important signs. And so thyroid, low thyroid, and energy is another big one we have to look at. And of course, most thyroid issues have an autoimmune component. So that's also a really important thing. And then, of course, just foundational things like diet, because if we have poor B vitamin, poor magnesium, poor amino acids, these things can also impact energy as well. So we have to kind of rule out some of these foundational things. If you have a crappy diet and you're low in some of these important nutrients like CoQ10 and B vitamins, magnesium, and just simple amino acids, yeah, you're going to have some problems. So we want to rule out foundational things first. So a good functional medicine doctor will really kind of look at your history, look at what a simple day looks like, get a general sense of what your routine looks like to make sure the foundation is at least set. That's very, very important. So when we get into the big mitochondrial toxins, of course, number one is going to be mold. So mold or the mycotoxins produced by the mold can definitely cause fatigue, can definitely jam up the mitochondria and the body's ability to generate ATP, can also cause cognitive issues, mood issues, brain fog issues. These are all common side effects of mold. So when we look at mold, we got to see, is it an active issue where you're living in a moldy environment due to water leaks in the roof or windows or a sub pump, backup, or just chronic high humidity that's causing mold growth due to the high humidity? We got to figure out, what's that cause. Is that an active issue, or is it a past issue when you lived for a few years in college in that moldy basement that had black mold on the wall, right? What's the root cause of it? So is it a past exposure or an active exposure? That's really important to delineate that. We can always test the current environment and see if it's active. We can also just take a look, see, usually a good history can figure it out. If someone's in a relatively new home, no history of water leaks, they keep it acclimatized pretty well. The basement is, waterproof, so to speak, dehumidifier, the whole 9 yards. We can still test it to rule it out, but those are pretty good signs that it's probably not a home issue. Looking at the person's history can also tell. Do we have a time frame for the period of time that we lived in a real moldy environment? Yes or no? And so if it's an active issue, we always want to rule out the current environment, because it's hard to heal if we have an active stressor like that that's continuing to perpetuate itself and in motion right now. So we want to delineate that. Is that an active issue now? If there's a strong past but not an active issue, it'd be good to look at mold mycotoxins in the urine. And so we can run a mold test looking at urinary metabolites of mold toxins. And that's really good to do. I find you want to challenge that test, because if you have poor mold detoxification capacity, you may not be able to push that mold out in the urine, the mold metabolites out. And so utilizing some NAC and glutathione can really upregulate phase 2 cytochrome P450 oxidase pathways, which help to expel that water-soluble mold toxins out in the urine. And when we look at the mold toxins, the big ones we're going to look at: Aspergillus, Penicillium, Stachybotrys. These are going to be citrinin species. These are going to be the big mold ones that we're looking at. And of course, the different molds like Aspergillus or Penicillium, they can produce, similar mycotoxins. You could have an Aspergillus species produce similar mycotoxins that a Penicillium species could produce. So good to look at the actual mycotoxins too. That can be a problem. Most people that have a problem with the mold tends to be more of the mycotoxins. Also, if we have chronic colonization of mold due to the environment, but we have a lot of mold in our gut due to it, like we're actually a mold factory in our gut, it's good to look at that, address the gut, but also make sure we address the environment too. You want to really hit it on both sides of the fence. So mold's a big one. You got to figure out active or not, previous exposure, yes or no, and also how high. Because if you're just kind of going in and you're doing a mold detoxification program, and someone's still feeling not the best a month, 2 months, 3 months in, it's going to be easy for a patient to quit if they're not seeing the results they want. So it's good to know how high their levels are at, because it could be something that may take months or even a year or so. So it's good to really quantify it so then you can set the expectation so the patient knows, hey, this is going to be a long-term treatment. Also, I don't really jump on mold right away. I may work on the mold environment stuff and get that addressed. And I've done other podcasts on that. So you can go look at, just type in mold on my YouTube channel or the website, and you'll get transcriptions on different podcasts and interviews. So we kind of gone into the actual remediation component and how to address those things. But I always work on getting the gut addressed first, because so much mold is detoxified hepatobiliary wise. And if you don't have good digestion, you're not going to get all the nutrients you need to start working on those detoxification pathways anyway. So you got to really get digestion dialed in before you really go over the top and detoxify mold. Say next thing out of the gate is going to be, I would say next thing out of the gate outside of mold will be heavy metals, especially mercury and lead. Mercury is a big one because that really jams up the electron transport chain and the Krebs cycle and how you generate ATP. And so we need good mitochondrial function. So if we have active heavy metals, that can be another problem. So we can do a urinary challenge test and see kind of where your tissue burden of heavy metals are. And I say tissue burden because if we just run a blood test, unless you actively lick some lead paint that morning or within a short period of time, you're probably not going to see it in the blood, because your body's pretty fastidious of keeping toxins out of the blood to not damage cells and organ systems. So it'll shunt that into the tissue, into the fat cells. It'll kind of sequester it pretty fast. So if you want to see how high your levels are at, you want to do some kind of a challenge agent. Now, if someone's really sick, we'll probably stay away from doing anything challenge-wise out of the gate, try to get the inflammation down. And we're doing a smaller dose if we do a challenge compound like DMPS or EDTA or DMSA. We do a smaller dose on that, and someone's really sick, we'd probably hold off on that out of the gates. And I never really push heavy metal detoxification while someone is inflamed or sick. Again, same reason for the mold stuff, is a lot of detoxification for the metals is hepatobiliary wise, meaning gallbladder, liver, into the gut, out the stool. And so if we have poor digestion, it's really likely that you could reabsorb a lot of those toxins from the heavy metal. So you want to be very aware of that, so you don't start pushing metals too soon and start making someone sicker. So that's a definite big mistake on the metal side. So you got to really get that person prepped, get their hormones stable, get their adrenals stable, get the inflammation down, get their digestion good, make sure gallbladder function is good, right? You want to make sure there's not a sluggish gallbladder, you're breaking down fat well, good bile flow, because if not, we could really get backed up, and that could make you feel a lot more sick. I would say after that, the next thing I think would be pesticides. Pesticides are going to be a huge one, whether it's Roundup or organochlorines. These are going to be a big one. I would also say, gasoline byproducts. Again, if you're in a big city and you're walking on the street and you're breathing fumes all day, that may be a bigger issue. Again, most people, work from home, or they don't, they're not walking to work. So the commute is probably less likely to have exposure to some of these gasoline products. But if you're eating more conventional, and you're getting a lot of pesticides, organochlorines, Roundup, glyphosate, these things can really affect your nervous system and can really affect your hormones. Especially guys can be impacted, because a lot of these pesticides are going to be estrogenic. And when guys get estrogen exposure, it's going to, number one, decrease their testosterone output, because it's going to decrease LH from the pituitary. LH is that signaling molecule to the gonads that tells the gonads or testicles to actually make testosterone. So you start to decrease your own internal production of testosterone. And then also estrogen starts causing fat cells to be produced. And the more fat cells you have, fat cells make it harder for you to actually lose weight, because then fat cells actually have an exocrine function where they'll actually produce more estrogen from the fat cell. And that can be a problem. And they also can produce interleukin 6 and different inflammatory compounds due to high levels of fat. And so then it's easier to become inflamed. It's easier to make more estrogen, which gains more fat. So it's really a vicious cycle. So you really want to look at where you're getting exposed to pesticide-wise. Obviously, organic meats or at least free-range meats. That way you're not getting the hormones there. Try to get more organic, clean vegetables and fruits. Good way to do it there. Of course, do not, if you can eat organic, great. If not, you can always do frozen organic, or you can try to get foods locally from local farmers that do a better job of maybe adhering to cleaner practices, but don't pay for an organic label. Those are all good options. And last but not least, you can always just try to eat from the Clean 15. These are foods that have the lowest pesticide residue. We'll put a link for the Clean 15, but foods that tend to have a peel on the outside that protect a lot of the pesticides getting in. And then you can stay away from the more dirty dozen. These are the foods that have the highest level of pesticide residue. Clean 15, lowest residue. Dirty dozen, highest residue. Eat the clean, stay away from the dirty. And again, you can always try to do local is better, and then try to do frozen if you need as well. And just do your best on that, washing some of your vegetables in a little apple cider vinegar. Grapefruit seed extract, hydrogen peroxide, diluted kind of mix can also help flush off any of the pesticides on some of the food you're consuming. So I hope that helps. Just to kind of round it up, we talked about some of the foundational causes of energy issues and mitochondrial fatigue. We talked about adrenals, thyroid. We talked about nutritional deficiencies. And now we're talking about the mitochondrial toxins, which are going to be mold, heavy metals, especially lead and mercury together. And then the last one would be your pesticides, which would be your organochlorine pesticides, your glyphosate, Roundup. These tend to be more estrogenic, neurological toxin that tends to drive more fat production. Fat in and of itself is going to cause more estrogen issues, decrease testosterone. And of course, with women, same thing. The more you go into estrogen dominance, the more that's going to create more PMS, breast tenderness, back pain, heavy bleeding, mood issues, irritability. So all of these things kind of come full forward. And of course, the other big thing that can really throw off your fat cells and your hormones is too much carbohydrate. Too much carbs for women is going to drive 1720 lyase, which is going to increase testosterone. In men, it's going to upregulate aromatase, which is going to impact estrogen. Again, both sexes tend to have hormones shift in different directions depending on the carbohydrate. Carbohydrates in men increase estrogen. Too much carbs in women increase testosterone and also increase chance of ovarian cyst. And that can also throw off prolactin, make prolactin go up, and that can also dysregulate a cycle too. Hope that helps, guys. If you enjoyed today's information, let me know. Comments down below. Give me a thumbs up. Appreciate it. Again, I see patients they have these issues all across the world. If you want to dive in a little bit deeper with myself and my staff, there'll be a link down below where you can reach out, try to get to the root cause of these different toxins and these different stressors and how they're impacting your health and your body. Again, if you enjoy it, give me a thumbs up and share with friends or family. All right, y'all. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Take care.